He saved a child from a burning house, risking his own life. But he didn't know that at that moment his own son was burning alive. He returned too late, and everything changed. Look what he built on the ashes of loss. Subscribe and write in the comments which city you are watching from. The coffee was still warm on the kitchen counter when the call came in. That morning, everything had started like any other day. The house was quiet, sun filtering through the blinds in stripes across the floor, dust floating lazily in the light. Noah was in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the rug, his small fingers working intently to build a fire truck out of red and white bricks. The television was off, the world outside still. It was the kind of morning that didn't warn you it would be the last. Ethan Blake, a 38-year-old firefighter and father of one, had poured himself a cup of coffee just moments before. He leaned against the doorframe, watching his son with a softness only parenthood could summon. "That ladder looks taller than the truck itself," he said, smiling. Noah looked up and grinned, a gap where one of his front teeth had been. "It has to reach the moon." Ethan laughed. "Ah, of course, lunar fires." "Can we watch the movie tonight?" the boy asked. "The one with the robot?" "Movie, pizza, and popcorn, I promise. I'll be home by 7. He meant it. He always meant it. He kissed the top of Noah's head, ruffled his messy brown hair, and slipped on his jacket. As he grabbed his keys, he called out one more time. "Love you, buddy. Love you more," came the chirped reply. At the station, the air was crisp and familiar. The usual banter filled the locker room. Boots thudded on concrete. Someone laughed too loudly. The team was like a second family tight-knit, scarred by the same battles. There were always stories, scars under sleeves, and silent understandings between men who ran into fire when everyone else ran from it. The call came just before noon. Structure fire, multi-unit apartment complex, reports of people trapped inside, smoke visible from blocks away. Ethan moved before the echo of the dispatcher's voice faded. Gear on, siren wailing, the truck tore down Main Street as wind and urgency rushed past the windows. When they arrived, the building was already roaring. Black smoke poured from the windows like floodwater, and flames licked the upper balconies with cruel hunger. He was in the first team through the door. Inside, heat clung to the skin like another layer of clothing. The floor groaned underfoot, smoke curled into his mask, and the radio buzzed with frantic updates. Somewhere above, a child was trapped. They moved fast, practiced. Ethan followed the scream of a frightened voice, found the girl in a bedroom corner, pressed into the wall like she was trying to disappear into it. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her face was streaked with soot, hair tangled with ash. She held a singed, stuffed rabbit against her chest. "I've got you," Ethan said through the mask, his voice calm despite the chaos. She didn't speak. She clung to him, her tiny arms tight around his neck as he carried her through the thick smoke and blistering heat. The stairs buckled beneath them, but they made it. Outside, EMTs rushed forward. The girl's mother screamed and collapsed to her knees, sobbing when she saw her alive. Only when the girl was safe and breathing in clean air did Ethan remove his mask. He leaned on the rig, catching his breath. His skin itched beneath the uniform, and his heart was still racing when the second call came in. Residential fire, Southridge neighborhood. He looked up, blinking away sweat. That was his neighborhood. Another engine responded. Protocol dictated he stay where he was. His truck was committed, his crew engaged. The system had its rules. It always had. Ethan stayed. The girl had survived. That was what mattered. He told himself that. By the time they cleared the scene, the sun was beginning its slow descent. Ash floated in the air like snow. His gear smelled of smoke and adrenaline. He stripped out of it at the station, shoved his phone into his pocket, and got in his truck, anxious to get home. Noah would be waiting, and there was a movie to watch. But when he turned onto his street, his hands froze on the wheel. Lights flashed red and blue. Smoke lingered in the air like a curse. The crowd of neighbors was silent, stunned. Fire tape flapped in the wind. His house, his home, was gone. The roof had collapsed inwards. Charred remains of the front wall leaned at odd angles. Smoke still curled from the ruins like fingers refusing to release their grip. His front porch had disappeared completely. He stumbled from the truck, his body already moving before thought caught up. A man grabbed his arm. "Holloway?" he asked, dazed. The neighbor's hands were bandaged, his hair singed. His eyes were red from more than smoke. "I tried," he said hoarsely. "I heard the crack. The window gave first. I tried to get him out. He was calling for you." Ethan didn't wait for more. The paramedics didn't stop him. They knew him. One nodded and opened the rear doors of the ambulance. There on the stretcher, wrapped in white, was a shape he knew better than his own reflection. Noah's small frame was half covered with gauze. His face, his beautiful face, was barely visible. His arms, blackened and blistered, lay still against his sides. An oxygen mask rested lightly over his nose and mouth. One eye fluttered open. "Daddy?" the boy rasped. "I'm here," Ethan whispered. His knees hit the floor. You were saving people," Noah said. "I knew you'd come back." "I'm so sorry," Ethan choked. "I should have been here. I should have—" "No," the boy interrupted. "You help people. You're a hero." Ethan shook his head, tears falling onto Noah's hand. No, buddy." "It's okay," Noah whispered. "You always pick old movies." Ethan laughed through the tears. "Yeah, I do. I love you," Noah breathed. "I love you more." The boy's eyes drifted shut. Then nothing. A stillness fell, sharp and absolute. Someone behind him said something. A hand touched his shoulder. But all Ethan could do was cradle the small body wrapped in gauze and think about the popcorn they never made, the movie they never watched, the fire truck still unfinished on the living room floor. He had saved a little girl, but lost everything else. His son was gone, and he hadn't come back in time. The smell of smoke stayed with him. It clung to his skin, lived in his clothes, embedded itself in the creases of his thoughts. Even after the fire trucks left, after the neighbors went back to their own intact homes, after the sound of sirens faded, the smoke didn't go. It hovered in the air around Ethan like a second presence, invisible but relentless. He smelled it in the cab of his truck, in the folds of the blanket someone had draped over his shoulders, even in the hospital hallway where he waited while they cleaned what was left of his son's body. Noah, 8 years old, gone. They gave him the white urn a week later, a ceramic thing that looked too small to contain the laughter that once filled their home, too smooth to carry the wild joy that lived in that boy's voice. There was a service, brief and quiet, no hymns, no formalities. Just Ethan, a handful of men from the firehouse, a chaplain who had never met Noah, and silence too thick for words. It rained lightly the entire time, the kind of drizzle that wasn't heavy enough for umbrellas, but soaked through everything anyway. Ethan stood still through it all, his arms crossed tight over his chest, eyes dry. His mind felt detached from his body, as if he were watching someone else mourn. He didn't speak to the men who came, didn't hear the words of comfort they offered. He nodded politely, shook the hands that were extended, and left as soon as the dirt was packed back over the small plot. There was nothing left to say. The next few days passed without meaning. He didn't return to the fire station. He couldn't. Every sound in that place would remind him of where he had been when Noah needed him most. Every hiss of a hose, every clatter of gear, every panicked voice on the radio. He wrote a resignation letter he never fully read, dropped it off at the station's front desk and walked away. No goodbye, no ceremony, just silence. He spent his night sleeping in his truck, parked across the street from the ruins of his house. It had been cleared of the most dangerous debris, cordoned off with temporary fencing, but the smell still rose from the ashes. Wet timber, scorched plastic, the lingering stench of something sacred lost. He couldn't look away. Not yet. Every morning he sat behind the steering wheel and stared at what remained. The porch where Noah used to sit eating popsicles in summer. The doorway they decorated with paper pumpkins every Halloween. The corner of the living room where the Lego table used to be. On the third night he dreamed of his son. Noah stood just beyond the twisted remnants of the house, framed in pale firelight. He looked whole, not like the boy on the stretcher, not broken. Just Noah in his pajamas, holding the same half-built fire truck, his eyes serious. "Fix it, Daddy," he said, pointing to the ruins. Please. Ethan woke up gasping, hands trembling. He didn't go back to sleep. The following morning, he went to the hardware store. The clerk asked what kind of project he was planning, but Ethan didn't answer. He simply bought the tools he needed: hammers, nails, lumber, paint, a generator, safety gloves. He loaded them into the bed of his truck and drove straight back to the ruins. It started with clearing. He tore down what remained of the walls, removing every scorched plank and twisted beam. Alone, hour after hour, for days. He didn't let anyone help. He didn't want sympathy, didn't want kindness. The sweat, the weight of each lifted timber, the blisters on his hands, these were things he could feel. Tangible pain, the kind that made sense. The yard turned into piles. Salvageable wood, scrap, ash. As he worked, neighbors passed on the sidewalk and nodded. Some offered food, others tried to make conversation, but he only nodded in return. No one pressed him. It was a small town. People knew how to leave the grieving alone. It was during the second week that he found the box. It was buried beneath part of the collapsed bedroom wall, blackened but intact. A shoebox, once blue, now gray with soot. Inside were the drawings, dozens of them, crumpled and smudged, but still clear. Noah's handwriting in large, messy letters. Sketches of fire trucks, rockets, dragons. One drawing stopped him, a picture of their house with two stick figures outside. One taller, labeled Dad, the other smaller, labeled Me. A smiley face on each, smoke curling from the chimney, a sun with rays in the corner. That corner had melted slightly. The colors bled, but he could still see the joy. Beneath the papers, wrapped in a strip of fabric, was the toy badge he'd given Noah for his 7th birthday. Junior Fire Chief. It was scuffed and half melted. Ethan didn't cry, not then. He sat in the middle of what used to be Noah's room and held the box in his lap. He whispered, "I'm so sorry." Not to the box, but to the air around him. And then he got back to work. He rebuilt the foundation with his own hands. It took time. The concrete was uneven at first, but he corrected it. Day after day, beam after beam, he began to restore the shell of the house, not as it had been before, but as something new, something that still held the memory of what had been lost. He recreated Noah's room first, measured it exactly. Same window placement, same closet size, painted the walls the same soft green Noah had chosen. It became a sacred space, the heart of what he was building. He found a replica of the rocket-shaped night lamp online, bought the same bedding, installed a shelf for toys, and placed the scorched badge on it like a memorial. Every morning he walked into that room and said, "Morning, buddy," like he used to. And every night he stood in the doorway and whispered, "Good night." It wasn't until the wind shifted that he noticed the smell again. Gasoline. He was painting a beam near the back wall when it struck him. The scent wasn't the same as smoke or ash. It was sharp, chemical. He stepped outside, walked the perimeter. Nothing unusual, but something gnawed at him. He returned to the pile of scrap he hadn't sorted yet. Rummaging through it, he found it. The neck of a broken glass bottle, charred around the rim, with traces of cloth still lodged inside. His breath caught. A Molotov cocktail, or at least the remains of one. He stared at it in his hand, his fingers tightening around the glass until it threatened to cut him. The idea of it. It felt surreal, that someone might have done this intentionally, that it hadn't been an accident. He took the bottle to his neighbor, Mr. Holloway, and asked what he remembered. The man hesitated, looked down at his injured hands. "There was a sound," he said, "like glass breaking. I thought it was a window at first, but then there was a rush, a big whoosh. It caught so fast like it was fed, and I swear I smelled gas, real strong." Ethan didn't say anything, just nodded, thanked him, and walked back to the site. He stood there for a long time, holding the broken bottle, the weight of it growing heavier by the second. He had lived in fire for most of his adult life. He had smelled accelerants before, knew the way they twisted flames, made them move faster, hotter, wilder. And now he had to ask the question he hadn't allowed himself to consider until that moment. What if this fire wasn't fate? What if someone had lit it on purpose? What if someone had taken Noah from him? The grief didn't lessen, the guilt didn't vanish, but something colder replaced the numbness. Something focused, something sharp. He wasn't done. Not yet. The bottle sat on the table like an accusation. Jagged, blackened glass, the neck half melted, and a scrap of cloth still lodged inside, singed and stained. Ethan stared at it under the light of a single bulb that swayed gently overhead in the unfinished kitchen. The silence in the room was heavy, but his thoughts were louder. He had held back this possibility, buried it under grief and guilt. But now it pushed to the surface like smoke through floorboards. He knew the signs of an intentional fire. This wasn't theory. He had spent nearly 2 decades crawling through burned-out buildings, attending fire investigation briefings, standing at the shoulders of experts who could read a wall of char the way others read a book. He had seen what gasoline did to walls, how it traced unnatural paths, how it accelerated destruction. And now the memory of Holloway's words echoed again. Glass breaking, a whoosh, and the smell of fuel. It hadn't been the stove. It hadn't been an accident. It had been someone. He didn't go to the police right away. He wasn't ready to hand over what he didn't yet understand. He needed to know more, to be sure, and something in his gut told him where to start looking. There had been so many people, so many calls. But his mind kept circling back to one name, Randall Hale. It had been 2 years ago. A garage fire contained, no fatalities. But the man had been furious. Not hysterical, not panicked furious. Randall had demanded that the crew pull his car out of the blaze, screaming that it was all he had left. At the time, Ethan had thought the man was just another grief-stricken homeowner, clinging to what little he could. But then came the court case. The ashes inside the car had belonged to Randall's wife. Her body had been cremated and stored in an urn. He'd been keeping it in the trunk, transporting it without permit, without refrigeration, without documentation. When Ethan made the call to leave the car in the fire because the structure was unstable, because no one was alive inside, Randall had sworn at him, spit at his feet. Later, when charges were filed, Randall had received a small fine. Nothing more. But he'd stared at Ethan through the courtroom glass with a look that never left Ethan's mind. Now that look came back with new clarity. He began to search. Public records, small-town whispers, online local forums. It didn't take long. Randall was still in the area. He worked at a gas station off a state highway, lived in a trailer about 2 miles beyond it. The address was listed as part of a low-income assistance program. He hadn't left. He hadn't moved on. Ethan drove there after sunset. The roads were familiar, winding through the outer edges of town where streetlights became sparse. The gas station glowed pale green in the darkness, the sign above the canopy flickering every few seconds. The convenience store inside looked nearly empty. Through the glass, he saw him. Randall stood behind the counter cleaning a coffee pot, his movements slow, absent. His hair had thinned. He was thinner too, face drawn, his posture that of someone who hadn't stood tall in a long time. But the moment their eyes met through the glass, Randall froze. The rag in his hand dropped to the counter. They stared at each other through that pain, time compressing, memory collapsing. Ethan opened the door. The bell chimed overhead. "You," Randall said, barely audible. "You remember me," Ethan replied. "Hard to forget the man who let her burn twice." The air was tense. No one else was inside. A fan in the corner hummed. Somewhere behind the counter, a small TV played a muted news broadcast. "You set my house on fire," Ethan said, voice level. Randall flinched but didn't answer immediately. His hand twitched towards something beneath the counter, then stopped. He sighed. "I didn't know the kid was in there." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Not relief, not fury, just cold, hollow confirmation. "I drove by that morning," Randall continued, looking down at the counter. "No toys in the yard, curtains drawn. I thought you were gone, at work, maybe left town. I didn't mean for him to." He didn't finish. "You knew exactly what you were doing," Ethan said. "You wanted to hurt me." "I wanted you to feel what I felt," Randall snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. "You made me watch my wife burn. You stood there with your rules and your damn calm voice, and you left her. You turned your back." She wasn't alive, Nathan said. You know that. She was mine, Randall hissed. They stood there for a long moment in silence, the only sound the buzz of the lights overhead. I didn't think a firefighter would leave his own son alone, Randall muttered. The words were a blade. Ethan stepped forward. I didn't leave him, he said, his voice breaking. I was out there saving someone else's daughter, while mine was calling for me. Randall looked up. For a second, there was something like remorse in his eyes, but it was too late for that. I should turn you in, Ethan said. You should, Randall replied, but you won't. Ethan turned and left without another word. He drove without music, without a destination in mind. The road stretched on, lined with trees that blurred in the darkness. He didn't stop until the sky began to lighten, the first hints of dawn crawling across the horizon. He pulled over at a rest stop and stepped out, the morning air crisp against his skin. He stood alone on the edge of a field, watching the sky shift from black to indigo. There were no answers out here, just quiet. He thought about Noah, about that dream, about the drawing of their house, the two stick figures out front. I didn't fix it, he whispered. Not really. But maybe he still could. Back home, the house stood half-finished. Noah's room was complete, but the rest remained raw wood and exposed beams. The idea came slowly, then all at once. Not a replacement for what had been lost, not a resurrection, but something else, a promise. He went to the county office, filled out paperwork, rezoned the land, filed for nonprofit status. He called lawyers, inspectors, electricians, ordered bunk beds, bookshelves, supplies. A friend from the old firehouse helped run wire through the unfinished frame. He called it the Noah House. When the name went on the permits, he stood with the pen in his hand a moment longer, staring at the letters. Then he signed. He didn't tell anyone about Randall. Not yet. He didn't need revenge. The fire had taken enough, but he would build something from the ashes. Not just a home, a refuge, a place where children who had lost everything could begin again. He would build it with his own hands, with the memory of his son in every nail, every beam. And this time, he wouldn't be too late. In the months that followed, the skeletal frame of the house slowly transformed. What had once been charred debris and a ghost of laughter became something new, deliberate, tender, layered with purpose. Ethan arrived each morning just after sunrise and worked past dusk. He carried lumber on his back, hoisted beams with aching shoulders, and smoothed drywall with hands that had once only known hoses and axes. This wasn't just carpentry. This was resurrection. The local paper picked up the story first. Firefighter builds home for orphans on site of family tragedy. Then a news station, then another. People came. Volunteers showed up, most of them strangers. They brought tools, donations, offers to help with landscaping, painting, plumbing. Some brought casseroles. Others brought silence and simply stood beside him with quiet respect. He didn't know their names, but they knew his. They had seen his grief on the evening news. They had read the name etched into the fresh cornerstone near the front porch. Noah Blake. The house grew room by room. It wasn't large, but every corner bore the weight of intention. There was a music nook near the stairs with a small upright piano and baskets of percussion instruments. Upstairs, 4 bedrooms, each with twin beds, shelves of books, and art supplies tucked into corners. The back windows faced the wide yard, where a new tree had been planted in the center of the lawn. He had chosen it carefully, a Japanese maple, like the one that used to shade Noah's bedroom. One morning, as he hammered in the final piece of trim near the main hallway, he found himself pausing at a doorway he had passed 100 times. It led to the smallest bedroom. The door had been closed since the framing stage. It had always been intended for one child, and for the first time in months, he stepped inside. The room was quiet, unfurnished. Bare walls, a single light fixture, and sunlight crawling across the floor. It reminded him of Noah's room in the old house, the way the light had slanted in during late afternoons, the scent of his son's shampoo lingering in the air after bath time. Thon sat on the floor. No words came. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He simply sat, letting the stillness fill him. He stayed there for nearly an hour before standing again. That night, he drafted the first letter. Dear future resident, this house is yours now. It was born from fire, but it wasn't defeated by it. You don't have to be either. This room was built for you, just you. No matter what the world has taken from you, you are not alone. You never were. Love, Noah's dad. He made copies, left one in each bedroom drawer. By spring, they had their first applicant. Her name was Mira, 8 years old. Her parents had died in a fire 2 towns over. She had been staying with a temporary foster family, but the match hadn't worked. She was quiet, withdrawn, didn't speak much. The social worker's report said she suffered from night terrors and severe mistrust of adults. Ethan met her on the front porch. She didn't want to come inside at first. She stood with her arms crossed, chin tucked, her small frame rigid like a tree bracing against wind. Ethan didn't try to coax her. He simply sat on the steps beside her and let the silence stretch. I used to live here, he said eventually, before it became what it is now. She didn't look at him. My son's name was Noah, he added. She blinked but said nothing. He liked drawing monsters, Ethan said. The friendly kind, ones that protected castles. Her mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. He waited. Then quietly she asked, Can I see my room? He stood without a word and led her inside. Her footsteps were tentative, but she followed. He opened the door to the smallest room, the one with nothing but light on the floor, and stepped aside. Mira walked in. She looked around, walked to the window, touched the wall. Then she turned and said, It smells like new wood. Because it is, Ethan said. Can I draw on the wall? Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Only in this room. She looked pleased for the first time. From that moment it began. Not just the shelter, but the transformation. Other children followed. 2 brothers from the foster system who had bounced between 4 homes in 6 months, a teenage girl who had lost her family in a flood, a 6-year-old boy whose mother had vanished and whose grandmother couldn't keep up anymore. Each child brought their own shadows, but slowly the house brought light. Ethan wasn't their father. He wasn't their teacher or their therapist. But he was present. He was the one who left notes in lunchboxes, the one who sat on the porch at night when someone couldn't sleep, the one who fixed broken shoelaces and listened when someone finally spoke. He wasn't trying to replace what they'd lost. He was trying to offer what he had once failed to protect. Word spread. The Noah house became something of a local landmark. A mural appeared on the side wall, painted by a volunteer art student, a silhouette of a firefighter holding a child, framed by flames that turned into doves. Beneath it the words, Where fire ends, home begins. One evening near the anniversary of the original fire, Ethan found himself standing alone under the tree in the backyard. The leaves had turned red. The sky was deep blue, the kind of evening Noah had loved. He heard footsteps behind him. Mira. She was taller now, more confident. She walked with her shoulders straight. Are you okay? She asked. I am now, he said. She held something out. A drawing. Crayon on thick paper. A house with a red roof. 4 stick figures. Her, the boys, the teenage girl, and him. You forgot someone, he said gently. She shook her head. Noah's the roof, she said. He didn't answer. Couldn't. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Ethan walked through the house one last time. Each door was closed, the soft glow of nightlight seeping under the cracks. He paused at the end of the hallway, where a photo of Noah hung in a small frame. His son smiling, a smudge of dirt on his cheek, his hand mid-wave. I kept my promise, Ethan whispered. And for the first time since the fire, the house felt whole. Not because the past was gone, but because something better had been born from it. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Watch the next video and share this one with someone who needs to feel hope again.